Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. The United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child released a statement this week, a report critical of the Holy See's response to the global sex abuse crisis, but they didn't stop there. They went on to urge changes to church teaching on certain issues. How far over the line has the UN gone? Here to tell us, I'm joined by the president of the Faith and Reason Institute and editor-in-chief of the CatholicThing.org, Robert Royal, as well as the president of the Catholic Family and Human Rights Institute, better known as CFAM, Austin Ruse. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here. Now, I want to start with why now? Why take this opportunity to comment on not only the church's approach to the sex abuse crisis, but then this kind of ad hominem attack on every major teaching of the Catholic Church? Austin.
The UN and its various human rights treaty monitoring bodies take every opportunity to advance an international right to abortion, to advance sexual orientation and gender identity as a new category of non-discrimination, to promote contraception and the whole panoply of UN-style family planning. So this is not unusual. What's unusual is that the Holy See was in the dock. The Holy See ratified this document in 1990, and this is only the second time that they've issued a report.
Well, and this begs the question, why did the Holy See sign on to these things? The United States, though Bill Clinton signed on to this, the Senate did not ratify it. Other countries have just not done it because it's an oppressive sort of regime once you become party to this. Why is the Holy See involved in this?
Well, I think that if you're familiar with the way European diplomats think about this, this is one of those nice things that you do, you know. And if you go to the actual document, you see that the document talks about protecting life before birth as well as after birth.
This is in the preamble.
This is in the preamble to it. But there's a very odd thing that's begun, that you use these documents as a starting point. And then you go on to this new international set of rights and structures of one thing preceding another. So religious liberty and cultural differences, which are spoken of a lot in almost all UN documents, they're there in black and white, but they're not there in fact. So this gives you a chance to go after the largest religious group that is a resistor to that new international order.
I want to play bites for you. I don't think either of you have heard these. This is Kirsten Sandberg. She is the chairperson of the UN Human Rights Committee on the Rights of the Child. Here was a summary of the findings.
The main finding of the committee was that the Holy See has adopted policies and practices which have led to the continuation of the abuse by and the impunity of the perpetrators. The Holy See has consistently placed the preservation of the reputation of the Church and the protection of the perpetrators above children's best interests.
Austin Ruse, your reaction?
First of all, her voice is, very dramatic, but on the content of what she's talking about, the Holy See ratified this document with the written understanding that they were ratifying it as the Vatican city-state. Yet this committee decided that they were going to determine that the Catholic Church all over the world is in the dock, and that the Vatican is responsible for every Catholic everywhere. So they went just like on all the other things, they went beyond their own purview. And the Holy See made it clear when they were grilled in January that if you are concerned about something that happened in Ireland, you've got to talk to the Irish and not us.
Yeah, there is a broadening of scope here. How binding is a document like this, Robert Royal?
Well, when you sign on to when you sign onto a treaty, you've signed onto a treaty. But as I said, the way that these documents are written, they're kind of a grab bag. There are bits and pieces of things that everyone is going to like or dislike, and they're there to create a consensus of a certain kind. When the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was passed, it was actually written largely by Jacques Maritain, one of the great Catholic philosophers in the 20th century. He said that everyone agrees to these principles just as long as you don't ask them why. and what we've started to see, first of all, I believe that document could never be passed right now because it is sort of an older document looking at religious liberty, cultural rights, parents, families, that sort of thing. We've moved on to something else here. And it's not a surprise to me at all, I'm sure it's not for Austin either, that a committee like this, these committees are very rogue. They're not very official. They've got no police power.
Yeah.
So they say a lot of things that people would like them to say.
But they really leaped from a critique of the handling of sex abuse to this. Roll it.
Holy See's past statements and declarations on homosexuality have contributed to the social stigmatization of and violence against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender adolescents and children raised by the same-sex couples.
So again, this is part of the protection of children and the rights of children.
The document itself, the treaty that they're supposed to monitor, doesn't mention this topic at all. They have jumped the shark, if you don't mind me saying
With
that.
apologies to Henry Winkler.
Indeed. The document is silent on homosexuality, it's silent on abortion, it's silent on adolescents having sex with condoms. This committee has no right to expand the scope of the treaty and then make the Holy See answer questions based on this reinterpretation. They cannot do that.
And they went on to talk about the Church's teaching on contraception. We'll play that. And Robert Royal, I want your reaction.
We also like to mention the negative consequences of the Holy See's position and practices of denying adolescents access to contraceptives, as well as to sexual and reproductive health and information.
Where is this leading? And do you think the Vatican's embarrassed to have signed this document in the first place? Do they regret it?
Well, I don't know. Who in the Vatican is now going to feel responsible? This happened 24 years ago, or however long it's been. Look, in fact, the tragedy here is that this committee could have done some things that were useful by telling the Church that it needs to do even more than it has done. And we know that there are places like here in the United States where there's absolute zero tolerance, and you can't ask for any more. In fact, it may even be a little un-Christian the way we apply this absolute zero tolerance of any sort of abuse of children. But to leave that and to go on to these other things, which are still highly controversial, and not only in this country but globally, these are not globally popular positions. So for them to go from here to talking about condoms, to talking about homosexuality, to talking about abortion, they've actually missed an opportunity to do something that was part of their real mission, for the sake of making this large ideological statement that has really come back to haunt them.
Very quickly, two quick issues I want to get to. Cardinal Stanislaw Dziwisz, the longtime personal secretary of John Paul II, is caught in something of a media controversy. I don't know if it's a real controversy this week. John Paul asked that his personal notes be burned. Cardinal Dziwisz kept many of them and has now published them, saying these are spiritual notes that should be preserved. Your thoughts?
Well, I think we have to see what's in there. If he used an editorial process by which he really did just leave sort of the spiritual. We hear a lot that many of these notes are the Pope asking himself, am I worthy to carry on as the leader? I mean, these are nice things to know.
It's personal, spiritual, the spiritual journey. I don't think we'll see any side notes about Cardinal X or, you know, Father so-and-so came in and he was really a bad guy.
I mean, you could argue this either way, but I'm glad we've got them.
Okay. Austin?
I hope some of that stuff is in there.
You and I both, but it's not going to be. I think Cardinal Dziwisz probably burned those, and he said he did dispose with the more personal things that just aren't appropriate for public view. But this is the spiritual testament of the man. Final question, very quickly. There is talk that Pope Francis might be opening a door to married or divorced and remarried Catholics receiving the sacraments. Where do you think this really is?
It's hard to say because Cardinal Maradiaga of Guatemala, who's very close with the Pope, has spoken against Cardinal Mueller of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, who's been rather strict about the older view of the indissolubility of marriage. My worry is not so much where it is, but where it may go, because as we see with this UN Commission, once these things begin to be opened up in this cultural climate in which we find ourselves, even within the Church, I don't know that there's any stopping point short of something quite radical or something quite confusing. So it's worrisome.
But even Pope Benedict said this was a question open to some study, and it should be studied and looked at. There are an awful lot of people suffering. Some who were, you know, in an abusive marriage or something, they remarried, and now they find themselves caught in a long annulment process.
Well, you know, it's even worse than that. One of my heroes, Monsignor Clark up in New York, said that, you know, half of the marriages are annullable because the bride went out the night before with her girlfriends and said, well, if it doesn't work out, I can always get a divorce. You know, and that's material for an annulment. And I think this is also extremely common. You get married and you have no intention of having children. So, so many of the marriages today are annullable that it is kind of frightening. It is kind of frightening what may happen if they do something like this.
No, we'll keep our eyes on it. Austin, Ruse, Robert Royal, thank you all for being here.